we will engage in our opening fireside chat. Dr. Al Tillery Jr.'s research and teaching interests are in the field of American politics and political theory. His research in American politics focuses on racial and ethnic politics, American political development, and social movements. His research in political theory focuses on American political thought and critical race theory. His book, Between Homeland and Motherland, Africa-U.S. Foreign Policy and Black Leadership in America, won the W.E.B. Du Bois Distinguished Book Award from the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. His papers have appeared in American Political Science Review, studied in American Political Development, Political Research Quarterly, and Journal of Black Studies, and several other journals, and several other news outlets internationally and nationally, and so much more. I mean, this is a very modest bio, Al. Al is incredible. He has been a friend to the work, a leader to the work, a thought partner to the City of Evanston, the Reparations Stakeholder Authority, FirstRepair, Reparations nationally, political thought nationally, and he has showed up for many of us in this room that have called out to Al after hearing presentations here. So if you are a city that has been in touch with Al, will you raise your hand? Yes, exactly. And so that's what we are here for. So Al, join us on stage, please. Join me on stage. And thank you for your leadership.
How you doing, Al?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah, you're doing okay.
It's been a tough month.
It's been a tough month. It has been a tough month. So that everyone understands what that means, as a nation, I think we all have seen the news and understand the outcomes of the election. But why don't we start with you just sharing a little bit about what you did do over the last several months.
Right. So I think if those of you were here last year, I kind of raised the alarm and said that if we're going to get reparations at the state and local level, the time is now, because there was a gathering storm. I think I predicted that Mr. Trump would be the Republican nominee again, and that he had a better than 50% chance of winning. I think I said if I went to Vegas, I'd put like half a mortgage payment down on Trump and the other half down on Biden. And so my partners in my research firm, the 2040 Strategy Group, one is here, Tabitha Bonilla, dear friend, colleague, and partner. We started polling last October, trying to figure out where the Democrats stood with the black community. And so the news wasn't good with the first polls that we pulled out of the transom in September. We found, that the Biden administration was pretty soft with one large segment of the black community, and those were the millennial and Gen Z voters for a variety of reasons. And we shared this information with the White House and the campaign, and they were like really skeptical of it. So we did a bunch of message testing on what would make them do better. And so we developed a bunch of frames about things they've been doing, and we ran those surveys in the black community. Tabitha created this black maternal health frame, and what we found is that when you told black men that Trump was really bad for black maternal health because he was going to overturn the ACA and cut back on hospitals and all these things, it really made black men run toward the Democrats. And so we also found that black people were really concerned about gun violence, crime, cutbacks in DEI programs, and we gave all that stuff over to the campaign, and the only thing they took was the maternal health piece, because they didn't want to talk about directly things they were doing to help black communities. And so we kept polling and sharing this information with them, and we got to January, and it was just really clear that they weren't listening because their numbers weren't moving in the right direction. So I said to Tom and Tabitha, Tom, our other partner who's not here, I said, I'm really nervous that they're going to lose this thing. And I said, would y'all give me permission to start a super PAC, whereby we would try to mobilize young black voters
despite what the Biden campaign or the Harris campaign wanted us to do. So we started one in April called the Alliance for Black Equality. And through the summer, we raised about $250,000. Several donors are in this room. Thank you all. Right. And we were able to cut and run 8 digital ads on Google platforms in Atlanta and Milwaukee, and then we were able to add buys in Philadelphia and in Detroit. And so our ads focused on the simple message that Donald Trump is going to come back into power, and he's going to implement a national stop and frisk program. He's also going to overturn the Civil Rights Act, right? And so when you tell millennial and Gen Z blacks this information, they overwhelmingly moved in the direction of, supporting VP Harris. And so, we had a $150,000 ad buy, which means that our commercials ran 4 times in the markets that we were targeting. We were able to reach 3 million black voters in all of those swing states with 4 ads from October 1 to Election Day. The problem is we needed like $5 million, right? So what we found is that in the zip codes the 53 zip codes where we ran our ads, the black turnout story that you're hearing about, like you heard black turnout was down like between 3 and 7 points nationally. In the zip codes where we ran our ads, it was nowhere near down that much. So 2 weeks prior to the election, my tiny super PAC is the only group in the country with black male-centered digital ads. We're writing to the campaign and saying, just take them, do whatever you want with them. Oh, well, we have to test them. Test them? We're 10 days out, right? So I think it was last October, Tabitha, we told the campaign they needed 83% with black men in order to win. They got to 78%. And so the message I want you to take away is the votes to keep Donald Trump out of the White House. And I know, a lot of us have problems with VP Harris and some of her stance. I get that. But I'm in the tradition of defensive voting, right? Vote to defend the black community and other vulnerable communities. There are enough votes that sat home on the couch in our black community to have put VP Harris in the White House. So, yes, Kamala Harris won the black vote. The couch finished second. You think about that. So about, 55 to 60% of black voters in these precincts voted. The couch won about 25 to 30%, and Trump won about 7 to 15%, depending on where you were, right? And so this big story, like, oh my God, like, now we don't have to talk about race because the black men and the Latino men are conservative. They all shifted to Trump. No, they didn't. They stayed home because the Democrats didn't offer them any targeted messaging to motivate them, to convince them to vote for VP Harris. They ran a bunch of ads on abortion, which were great. I mean, groups like, American Progress, American Bridge, they spent like $80 million running ads about abortion. And, VP Harris's share of the white woman vote grew by 2 points for $80 million, or more like $160 million, right? So it's been a tough month because a lot of us in this room probably warned the Democrats about what was going to happen. And now we're in the find out phase. And it's tough because the find out phase is going to wreak so much havoc on vulnerable communities. And I've seen the cute little meme and some of my, black women, we did our thing. Now let's just sit back and eat chips and watch what's going to happen to the people that, and I'm like, or I'm watching everyone posting their beautiful diversity gala photos on LinkedIn. And I'm like, okay, that's great. This could be the last time you get to do this. right? So I'm sorry.
Thank you. I mean, you really jumped into the next question. Can you say more about the state of democracy?
Teetering, weak. And it's really shocking. It's not shocking, and I will defend the people in marginalized and low-income communities that voted for Mr. Trump to the end, right? Because here's why. So what changed in the black community and why the Democrats didn't see this coming and they didn't expect this to come and why they poo-pooed us when we told them that their win numbers were off is because black people have been the best voters in the history of the Republic since we got the vote in 1965. We way over, like the biggest predictors of voting in political science are educational status and socioeconomic standing, income in particular. Blacks way overperform both their educational level and their income levels. They have since we got the vote. I always tell the story of my grandfather, William C. Tillery Sr., dropped out of high school at 16, lied about his age, signed up into the Navy, beat the racial quota, spent World War II shooting missiles at the Japanese across the Sea of China, came back to segregated Virginia in 1945, and still couldn't vote for 23 years. Right? So when they got that ballot, right, they used it. And then their kids, the boomers, used it. And then their grandkids, the Gen Xers, used it. Now we're in a situation where generational replacement is affecting the black community. The largest cohort in the black community right now are the millennials. Something like 40% of the voting age population in black America is under 40. So I love these kids, we've taught them, but they don't remember the bad old days. They don't remember Jim Crow. I've literally had kids say to me, black kids in my class, what does Jim Crow mean? They don't remember integration. So it's up to us in this room and the parties that want their votes to supply that narrative. What they do remember is that in 2020, their grandparents told them, their parents, go out and vote. We got to get Trump out of office. This is big. Joe Biden is going to pass this Voting Rights Act, so you won't have to stand in line for 5 hours in Atlanta the next time you go. Or they're going to pass that George Floyd Act. Remember George Floyd? Remember that? They're going to pass that, right? And they stood in line. And the Democrats didn't do either one. Oh, the filibuster. Oh, Joe Manchin is just such a principled objector. You know, he's really worried. When they have the power to break the filibuster to do both of those things. So I heard that, and what I also, professor, but what about that stimulus check, professor? Trump put money in my bank account. And I'm like, he didn't, the Congress passed that. Donald Trump's signature's on it. How do you fight back against that? It's not my job as a professor at Northwestern or person that runs a super PAC or runs a consulting firm, to fix that. It's the job of the party with $1.5 billion in the bank to spend on ads to fix that. Why they didn't spend on ads is because they didn't see the generational change happening. And then a lot of us in the civil rights community were like, well, everybody in my church is going to vote for you, Joe. I just don't believe that 25% of black men are going to vote possibly for Trump. The only group that got it right with us was the NAACP. They raised the alarm. They did 2 polls that found what our 11 polls found. The problem with the civil rights groups is they're all 501c3 groups. So they saw the danger just as we did, but all they can do is, are you voting in the election? Please go vote. They can't say, vote against Donald Trump, because they'll lose their tax status, right? So, that's where we are. And so democracy is weak because our traditional means for mobilizing don't work in the same way. And now we've got this terrible situation where Trump is coming back into power and he's installing people whose sole purpose is to break the government. Why have all of these people been to Russia so much? Right? One of the last things John Lewis said is, this whole thing is not legitimate. Open your eyes. Right? So.
Thank you. And so you touched on everything. The
Sorry.
appointments. I knew that would happen, actually.
Come from a long line of preachers, y'all. Sorry.
I knew this would happen. That's why I wanted to do the fireside chat with you. You would do it. But there are a couple things. So you did touch on the appointments. You didn't touch on Project 2025. But I
Yes.
want to bring this conversation up.
Yes.
Because we're here for solutions. Solutions
Okay.
only is a theme, and there is a path forward, even with Trump in office.
Yes.
We have overcome worse. I heard someone say something. Yes, we have overcome worse, and there is a path forward. So we want to work on solutions,
Okay.
strategy, how we work together so that we can continue building the momentum that we have begun to build with reparations, particularly local.
Yes.
So given that, and if there's anything that you do want to say about Project 2025, add
Oh.
that. But
Okay, I'll start there.
we want to get to what is our path forward. Localities are advancing reparations. Of course, we believe that local gives us our best hope while we synchronize and build on that effort to get to a federal response.
Yes.
But even under the Trump administration, we have legislative challenges against our
Yes,
worst.
we will.
Anti-local reparations bills. We have
Yes.
lawsuits. Evanston has one right now.
Yes.
But we can still win. How do we do that, Professor Tillery?
So I'm gonna say an amen to everything you just said, and I'm also gonna say amen one more time to remind me that I'm not preaching and be more disciplined in my answers. So just get it out. So a Project 2025 piece is just another example of why the democracy is teetering, right? So we know all of the authors of the Project 2025, which is, the Heritage Foundation and conservative activists, they always have written a playbook about dismantling what they call the administrative state. What that really is all the laws that protect women, black people, Latinos, Asians, gay people, the elderly, the disabled. And so they want to dismantle these laws. They've wanted to do it since the 1980s. And every Republican that runs for president kind of leaves it out there. Trump, in the social media age, actually gave it a lot of elevation prior to his claiming the nomination. And then they started testing it because people on our side, including our firm, started running message tests showing how unpopular it was. And so Trump disavowed it. The media would just say, oh, Donald Trump disavowed Project 2025. You can't stick that on him. And now he's appointing all of the people that wrote Project 2025, right? And so what Project 2025, and I really want the reparations community to hear this, the work of dismantling the administrative state started the day that people like my grandfather voted in segregated Virginia in 1968. It has always been about putting black folks back into second-class citizenship. And generations of Republican leaders and people in the Supreme Court, like William Rehnquist and these others, they all participated in this project. 1964, Barry Goldwater ran for president on the plank of overturning the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Civil Rights Act of 1964, like the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, was all put in place initially to protect black people. Now, it's been extended to all the other vulnerable groups. Great. Black people have never had any problem with that. But if you think for 1 minute that the only thing Donald Trump wants to do is round up 30 million immigrants and deport them, and then he's going to stop there, then I've got a bridge in Brooklyn that I want to sell you. because that'll help me get out of here, right? But so the next thing that they are coming for is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And how are they going to do it? Just like, I remember being on a panel with a very learned activist. He said, "Oh, professor, you're so hyperbolic about the Voting Rights Act." This is like 2011. There's no way they're going to take down the Voting Rights Act. Okay, so then they broke Section 5 preclearance and killed it. So the first month in office, I expect Donald Trump to do something that he tried to do before he left. He's going to write an executive order banning every government agency from collecting what's called EEO-1 data. I see a lot of heads nodding. EEO-1 data are all the checkbox forms that tell the government what you are. If you stop collecting that data, there is no way that the EEOC or the Department of Justice can enforce civil rights laws to protect you. So overnight, we will become a society like France. So I have two brother-in-laws that live in France. There are tons of black people in France, but no races, because the government doesn't collect any data. So black people in France, like 85% say they experience like daily racial discrimination, but the government won't fix that because there's no paper trail. So that's how he's going to come after the Civil Rights Act, right? So what do we do in response? We've got to use the incredible power that black people and our allies and all progressive groups have in these 5 blue states that matter: Illinois, California, New York, Maryland, and Massachusetts. Why do those 5 blue states matter? 75% of the American economy is made in counties in those 5 blue states, right? The other states are net welfare receivers, right? Black people also have a ton of legislative power in those 5 states, right? So if we hold the ball and we say, now we've got to write laws at the state level to counteract what Donald Trump is doing at the federal level, and companies in these 5 states have to comply, that's a power play. So one thing that the Alliance for Black Equality is doing is we're shifting from our project of trying to elect Kamala to trying to pass state legislation that will be the equivalent of state-level civil rights acts. Every worker, every company with more than 100 workers has to collect state-level EEO-1 data, give it to the state, and then they have to justify how their hiring processes were actually race neutral. What did you do? Did you blind resumes? Did you have diverse interview panels? What did you do, right? And so if we can pass those laws and get the largest corporations in America complying, it's not going to matter what happens at the national level, right? So that's time to move on that now. Reparations, where you can get things adjudicated now, get laws passed, get disbursements happening now in the first legislative session of the next year. You've got to do it now. I mean, one thing that when so the hands that went up in the room, folks saying that they reached out to me last year, the first thing I said to all of you is, do it now. You do this. This is not going to be a long movement for reparations. It's got to be now. And then the final thing I'll say is we've got to start using some of the things that the right wing does against us in our favor. So there's a case where they broke Chevron deference. Chevron deference was an old Supreme Court case from, I think, the 70s, where Chevron tried to say that they weren't subject to federal regulations. The Supreme Court said that's nonsense. Of course you're subject to federal regulations, and they can set limits on you, right? The Roberts Court broke that last year. So now every time someone tries to enforce regulations against a state like Texas or these other places, they say, oh, Chevron deference was broken. We don't have to listen to you. People of color, LGBTQ, disabled, the elderly, all of the marginalized groups need to start filling the courts with discrimination lawsuits right now and using that same logic saying, well, y'all broke Chevron deference. So we don't have to wait for a ruling for the EEOC, right? Just find a lawyer and start suing. Because, we're on calls, Tabitha and I, with Fortune 500 CEOs all the time. The only thing that they're afraid of is someone cutting their executive compensation. They fear that more than anything. The second thing they fear is lawsuits. And so when you start filling the courts with lawsuits about reparations, about discrimination, this is how you win. That's our path forward. So I hope that answers.
It does. Yes,
Yeah.
it's very helpful, Al. Very helpful. So we all are sold on the local, right? That's why we're here. We're well in position, have been doing this work for some time. What are your thoughts about the necessity and urgency of our allies and institutions to play a role?
I mean, I think what the reparations movement at the local level needs to understand, from my perspective, is that sometimes to get to the legislative outcome, you need to pass what, smart people in government call enabling legislation, right? So what we were able to do in Evanston, where you were able to do, is we had a sympathetic public, we had a sympathetic, governance structure, and so you were able to move right to legislation that was meaningful, right? If you're in a red state and you're, facing backlash at the national level, but also in your localities about reparations, start trying to think about things that you can do with your allies. Like we had Shorefront. Start collecting all of this testimony on the harms. You can do that. No one can stop you from doing that. Move to that now. Then, once you have that done, think about other ways that you can use what are called the race-neutral laws to your advantage, right? So maybe you get your city council to pass an audit law saying every company in your city has to examine the ways in which it's, citing where it's located, its business operations, how it harms vulnerable populations in your community. And you can define vulnerable populations as people under a certain income bracket, $50,000, that have lived in the United States since 1619, right? And so that's another thing, so when the Fearless Fund case happened, I don't know if y'all know about that, right? I was speaking to Reverend Sharpton, and I said, Rev, I can help fix this if you would put me in touch with the folks at the fund. I said, all they need to do is redefine their criteria. Fearless Fund was blocked from giving aid or grants to black women entrepreneurs because Stephen Miller, who's now in charge of policy at the White House, said it's racist. So I said, well, why don't you just change your criteria? Instead of saying you're going to give to teams that are led by black women, say you're going to give to teams that are led by women of all races who are immigrants from Africa, whose families came between 1619 and 1900, who are part of diverse leadership teams, who are committed to solving the problem of racial inequality. If you do that, that will only leave you with black women. And they said, oh, Professor, thank you for the nice idea, but we're going to win. And I'm like, y'all are not going to win. So kind of re-articulating their principles to serve us at the local level with our allies. But I'm just going to call out, I'm not here speaking on behalf of Northwestern because, that never is a good thing for Northwestern. I'm here speaking on behalf of 2040 and the Alliance for Black Equality, and I don't want my man Mike Schill to get in trouble with the guys, the pro-Trump guys that he works for, right? So what I will say is that the allies are all running away. Universities, corporations, they're all running away because they're doing what Tim Snyder, the scholar of authoritarian, says. They're all pre-complying with the rise of fascism. because they're not going to be harmed. So we've got to find out, but there are a ton of allies, churches, churches, synagogues, local historians, nonprofit groups that are not going to run away from the fight. So all of those have to be lined up to work with folks in governance in order to win.
Thank you for that. We're fortunate to have incredible allies, many here in this room today. Al, the folks have questions for you.
Okay.
So if we could just have time for 2 questions. I think we have time for 2 questions. If you could make your way to the microphone. Oh. Go to the mic. Oh, we have mics over there. I'm sorry. So, Keith, right behind you, there's a microphone.
I'm chairman of the Michigan Democratic Party Black Caucus. And 3 weeks before the election, I was interfacing with the National Party about resources into Michigan. And they waited 3 weeks and they sent me $200,000. You got $250, I got $200. What I learned about this whole deal is Gene O'Malley was the chairman of the Democratic Party, the campaign. She wanted to get rid of Kamala a year before that.
Yes.
Now she was overseeing the money. What happened is she had a company that was buying ads all through the country. She got $265 million
Yes.
transferred to her business.
Yes, that's correct.
You have to look at this whole thing in totality. And I love my white brothers and sisters that are here today. They were getting paid.
Yes.
They became millionaires.
Yes.
While they tell us to go vote, they was getting paid. Okay? And so I look at this whole thing right now, 2 things is very critical. One, in Michigan, we're getting ready to get a new chairman of the Democratic Party. Now they're getting ready to do, on a national level, try to bring a new guy in, but they're showing this guy from Wisconsin and this guy from Minnesota. So they already got the game rigged, but we need to join the Democratic Party and enforce our will on them because they need us.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So first, they were already millionaires because they've been now they have more. And so the kind of the so-called centrist wing, what they wanted to do was claim that the loss just reinforces their call for the Democrats to become more conservative. But they made no ads targeting communities of color, none. And what our project shows that with the smallest investment, we were able to hold the line. And yeah, so let's talk afterwards, please. Okay, yes. I think we have over there.
Could you please introduce yourself?
Mami Fia Wangaza, Greenville, South Carolina, Malcolm X Center for Self-Determination, WMXP Community Radio. In your comments, I hear contempt for the competency of Black professionals. And I think that we have to acknowledge that and to deal with it. I appreciate the proposal of dealing with states, returning issues back to the states, but that's how Roe versus Wade was overturned. That's in the voting, the concept of cracking and packing is states' rights, and we are not sufficiently organized nor resourced to go state by state, especially with an administration that more likely than not will have its DOJ to join with the states to resist the kind of defense that we would need to wage. So I would ask how you would address those points.
So so I don't have contempt for anyone. What I'll say is I get frustrated when people don't see trains coming at them, and so, but I don't have contempt. So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing that I'll say is that if we're going to do politics as it was deployed in 1957, which requires a ton of, community discourse, people power, door knocking, mobilizing, that's what we have excelled at for generations. The reason we lost this election, as this gentleman was saying, is because we didn't spend enough to get that done. So one thing we can do at the local level is spend to levels that will allow us to do what we do best. But what I'm saying goes farther than that, which is that we lost because Elon dumped $20 million into Pennsylvania in the last week, and we had no one on our team saying, well, I'm going to take some of my $250 million commission out and give it to this gentleman in Michigan. And then when you get there, there's no one saying, vote Kamala, right? Other than the Democratic Party, which young black people are deeply skeptical of. And they didn't spend anything on ads beating up Trump. So I'm not saying that we should retreat to a federalism is the solution, story, whereby we're, just these 5 states. What I'm saying is that we have enough power. What would Dr. King have done if there were 63 black members of the House of Representatives and 5 black senators in 1963? That's what we have right now. Let's turn up the heat on them to turn up the heat on the corporations in the blue states that already claim to be supporting us, and that will open this thing up a little bit so we can think about strategies to help us fight the long game. But in no way do I think federalism is the answer. It certainly is not.
Let me just say this, and I apologize. The consideration of forming a non-aligned approach where we, in fact, present our agenda and insist upon it being met, as in the case of
Yes.
earning the black vote for reparations.
I think the best thing that black people could do would be a third party right now, a third progressive party. It will never happen. It will never happen because the people who are elected to office work for the same super PACs and donors, and they all hope that they're going to be Barack Obama. So the only way that we get that to happen is if we turn up pressure on them instead of it always being such a love fest, right? You can love them, but you still, and so what I said when we were struggling, my brother Peter Braithwaite here helped lead the fundraising, we were struggling to raise, $250,000, I was like, if every black person of voting age gave us $1, we'd have $20 million, and that would be enough to win this election, right?
Thank you. Our last 2 questions. Sister Robin, if you want to make your way back up, there's time. Dr. Daniels?
I really don't have a question. I just wanted to add a quick addendum to the brilliant analysis of Professor Tillery. And that is when Lyndon Johnson signed the 1965 Voting Rights Act, he famously said, "We just lost the South." And the reason why that's important is because the pundits all over the air are talking about how to get the white working class voters, and if we just could change our messaging and so forth and so on, ignoring the fundamental reality that race matters. And that's what Lyndon Johnson was saying. He was from the South. He knew that by signing the 1965 Voting Rights Act that most white Democrats who had been privileged, by the way, under the New Deal, they had a special deal. They got white folks in the South got benefits that black people couldn't get. That was the
Yes.
deal that was cut. So as soon as that was broken, then he knew they lost the South. The other thing I'd like to say to my dear beloved sister Afia, there is a way out. And that way out is the Working Families Party. That is the emerging third force in American politics.
Okay. Well, I can't add to Dr. Daniels. I agree wholeheartedly. I will say with the Working Families Party, though, it's a resource issue. We've got to give them resources, and we've got to speed all of this up. So.
Okay, if I really said what I really wanted to say, y'all wouldn't want to hear it, because I think we all should pack up, go get a compound internationally, and be up out of this piece. But if we're going to work within the system...
Ghana's taking folks, by the way. Ghana is taking folks.
So the fact of the matter is, you know, we're talking about what coulda, woulda, shoulda, but what has happened has happened. So we need to start really seriously thinking about what we're going to do. And I want to say, I did hear, I don't know who that was, but Roland Martin talked about a strategy. Instead of us women saying we're going to chill out for the next 4 years, what about the ground game? I know it take a lot of organizing and everything, but just like in the 60s, civically, we have to grab power in each of our communities. We got to go to the meetings, get on city council. How did Robin was able to do that legislation is because she was an alderwoman. So each one of us has to get candidates, put them in place so that they can, if we're going to work within the system, we need to stop talking about what has happened. It is done. We need to start moving forward, because we are in this, right? Secondly, I'm serious about our protection, because a lot of us are still on, the kids are on TikTok, dancing and all of that. We need to really think seriously about how we're gonna protect ourselves. We need to think seriously how we're gonna hunker down and get ready, because they're getting ready to dismantle everything that we have worked for. So all this chit-chatting and talking, what are we in here going to do together? When we leave here, we can't just disperse to our communities. We got to keep in touch. We got to talk about what we're going to do and get mobilized like they used to do. I'm sorry.
That's right, Robin.
But we are at war. We are dying. We can't be sitting up here chit-chatting and talking about the past. We have to, my mother was a Black Panther. That's where they come from, okay? So we need to start seriously coming together, talking about real solutions. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you. That's it. If you had any response, otherwise, thank you.
Yeah, my response is amen. I mean, I think we all know what, if you know, if you want to look to join our citizen effort, the Alliance for Black Equality campaign, we are going to be starting a state-level legislative campaign next week. And, you know, just go, if you're curious, go to allianceforblackquality.org, look at the ads we ran in this cycle, and you'll see it's the kind of thing that we're putting out there. But we do want to turn up pressure with a petition campaign for our Democratic Black elected officials starting like January 5th. Like, we want to drop tons of petitions on them saying that they need to like put some steel in their spines for what is coming next. Not be on television talking about pardoning Donald Trump.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Tillery.